All right. Iyov, back to Iyov. So when we left off, the last thing we did was talking about Iyov's, what we call his breakdown, right? About why he denied God's omniscience and his hashgacha, and not other stuff, and then what his view was. And we said that he basically, his view, so let's summarize here, okay? So what does Iyov believe now about why he suffered this fate? If you ask
God
him,
doesn't know everything.
Yeah, because God doesn't know everything, and therefore what determined that he suffered the loss of his children and property and boils and all that stuff?
God didn't know that he did all these good things, and because he didn't know it, therefore he didn't get the reward, or he was punished for things that he didn't do.
Not exactly, because that's the fact that he held God didn't know about it is what allowed it to happen, but what actually made it happen? Like, you know, like
Chance
yeah, chance. Okay, right. Let me just clarify the question though, just to make sure we got this here. So Leah, like, let's say for example, you were in charge of babysitting one of your siblings, okay, and your mom comes home and finds out that the kitchen is on fire, and your mom says, like, why is the kitchen on fire? And you said, because I wasn't watching. That's not an answer about why the kitchen is on fire. That's how could it have happened that it got to this. But an answer she's looking for is someone like microwave tinfoil, or like someone like, didn't watch the Hanukkah candle, so God not knowing about it is what allows it to happen, but what actually made it happen. So that's what Ayala said is, according to Iyov, it's either chance or everything was predetermined based on astrology. Okay, so he was fated for it in some way. Like this had to happen, and that's why he complained about his birthday, because if he had been born on a different day, then this wouldn't have happened. Because either he would have gotten a different result, or he would have been under a different star and wouldn't have gotten that fate. Okay. Any questions about that, or questions, lingering questions about God's knowledge from last time? I don't want to spend too much more time on that for now, but okay. So now we're moving on to the next part of the book. Okay, so just to go over the plan one more time for the upcoming weeks. So we're going to do chapters 4 through 5, which is Eliphaz's response to Iyov. That's Iyov's first friend. So we'll probably get through most of that or all of it today. Then Iyov's refutation of Eliphaz. Then his next friend, Bildad's response to Iyov, and then Iyov's refutation of Bildad. Then Sophar's response to Iyov, and then Sophar's response to Iyov's response to Sophar. Then we're going to skip chapters 13 through 31, which we really are, both because I have not learned it and because I don't think it's the best use of our time. Then we're going to go back to chapter 1 through 2 and decode the mashal of the Satan and the Bnei HaElokim. Then we're going to do chapters 32 through 42, which is the answer in Sefer Iyov. That's Elihu, okay? And the method we're going to use is like this. We're going to read each section in English, because this is now, again, the difficult Hebrew part. So we're going to read it in English. It's also very poetic. We're going to get the main ideas in each section. We're not going to try to understand every line. We're going to try to get a basic idea for the minor points being made, and we're going to talk about them a little bit, but we're not going to go into depth on them because they're not really related to the final answer. And the public service announcement here is everything that we're doing in the middle here is according to the Malbim. Okay, when we get to the answer in Iyov, that's going to be based on the Rambam. But this whole middle part, we're taking the Malbim's approach. So anything here, this is just one version of it, and there are people who disagree. Okay, now I forgot to tell you, remind you before class, if you would want to print this out, I posted the source sheet by accident last week, but you don't have to print it out. We're going to go over this now. Okay, so let's read through it together, and we're going to read it in chunks and then try to define what the main point is. Okay, who would like to start us off reading? Go ahead, Ayala.
Okay. Eliphaz of Yemen then answered, saying, has misfortune ever tested you before this, that you are now become so wary? Who can now remain silent and not dispute you? Behold, you will serve as a moral example to many and strengthen those who are weak of faith. Now your words will serve to raise up one who has stumbled in his faith and straighten buckling knees. Because now that something bad has happened to you, you are already wary. You are only grazed, and yet you're bewildered.
Yeah. Side point, English-wise, and I can't tell if this is just like a New York pronunciation thing or if there's a mistake here. The word W-E-A-R-Y, how do you pronounce that? Weary, right? And there's a difference between weary and wary. Okay. What's the difference between weary and wary?
Weary is like tired. No, weary is tired.
Weary is tired. Yeah, what is W-A-R-Y?
Isn't weary like old?
No. Emily, here's your word of the day. What does wary mean? W-A-R-Y.
Is it when you like wear like something's really worn out?
That's weary. That's W-E-A-R-Y.
But that's when a person's worn out. Like
No, yeah, it's when a person's worn out. Yeah, weary. But wary means careful or cautious. Okay, completely different word. Okay, and the reason I'm saying this is I couldn't hear which one Ayala was saying, but I have a friend who, until his 20s, thought that it was the same word. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that you know what that is. Okay.
I thought that too.
Oh, okay, good. All right, just wanted to make sure. All right, good. No shame in learning vocabulary. Okay, so now we're not going to read the whole chapter. We're going to read it bit by bit, and then we're going to summarize. So, in your own words, what point or points does it look like Eliphaz is making to Iyov here? What is he telling him in your own words?
He's kind of like downgrading the bad that just happened to him.
Yeah.
Saying, like, you got so much good in your life, and this one bad thing, like, it must be that it's supposed to teach other people a lesson. Like,
okay,
you
good.
deserve it.
Okay, good. Excellent. So those are the 2 points he's making so far. Number one is, and I'm kind of summarizing this in my own language. Don't be a wimp. God only grazed you, but you fell apart. Okay. Stay strong and set an example to inspire other people. Okay. Now, just to make sure we understand the word here also, what does it mean to graze someone? Not grazing like in the pasture like the cows do.
Like to like slightly hurt someone, almost like
Yeah.
like a very shallow cut.
Exactly, very shallow cut. The bullet only grazed him; it didn't actually injure him. So, what do you make of that? What's your opinion about Eliphaz telling Iyov this?
I think it's kind of like patronizing. It's like he just lost his family and everything.
Yeah.
Like only grazed you. Like what?
Exactly.
What
It's
is
an
that?
I feel like this is extremely rude and insulting and patronizing. And if Eliphaz thinks that this is just grazing, what does he think that like being destroyed is? I mean, Iyov lost his property, his family, and is reduced to a quivering pile of boils, right? So it's very like it's minimizing Iyov's pain and suffering and being insensitive. And then like, what do you think of his statement of you should stay strong? Let me just look back at the words again. Behold, you will serve as a moral example to many and strengthen those who are weak of faith. Now your words will serve to raise up one who has stumbled in his faith and straighten buckling knees. So he's basically saying like, if you stay strong, then other people will learn from you. What do you guys think of that?
I feel like that part's nice, but it's not really the right situation to say that. He's not so sympathetic. No, he's not so empathetic or anything.
Yeah. Okay, good. So
Grow up.
yeah, so this also this also shows a severe lack of empathy here. The fact that when someone suffers a horrible tragedy, that's not the time to tell them, "Oh, look, you're going to be an example. People will learn from you." You know, that's just not the best thing to do. And also, it's not really right now. I mean, we'll see. He gives an answer later on. He's not really explaining why it happened. He's not saying God did this to make you into an example. He's saying that if you were strong, then you would have an example. And furthermore, by the way, it's kind of insulting because he's implying that Iyov is just like being a weakling. You know, that's why I use the word wimp. Okay. Side point, there is a way to learn Iyov, by the way, if you were going to go into depth, not that we are, is one way to learn Iyov is to do a rhetorical analysis, not on the Sefer, but on the dialogue of like, what is Eliphaz trying to accomplish and why is he trying to accomplish it this way? And learning techniques about how you should and shouldn't speak to someone who suffered a loss. Okay. Because part of Iyov as a Sefer is, how to cope with human tragedy. And this has a lot of examples of what not to do. And this is a perfect example. Okay. Next, one more line. Go ahead, Ayala.
But see, your fear was actually your folly, and it was only your hope that motivated your righteous ways.
Yeah. Okay, so this is a little poetic, but I think we can decode it based on what we've learned about Iyov before in the first two chapters. What accusation is Eliphaz making of Iyov right now?
that whole time where he was really righteous was just out of fear, and then now that he lost everything and has nothing else to fear, then he's going to abandon it.
Exactly, right? So this is the same accusation as the Satan. He's saying your avodas Hashem, right, whether that is Torah or whether that's before Torah, was just motivated by hope of reward and fear of punishment. And I'm adding this terminology in because we're familiar with it, even though he doesn't say this, is it was not lishma. You weren't serving God for the sake of serving God. You were serving God because of reward and because of fear of punishment. And you can think about it here. What do you think he's going to say about why Iyov suffered? Or to put it in a different way,
for the wrong reasons.
You were doing it for the wrong reasons, right? Exactly. So he's going to imply if you had been serving God for the right reasons, then none of this would have happened. But you were serving God for selfish, self-motivated reasons that had everything to do with like your wealth and your protection and all that stuff. Okay. Someone else want to read now? Emily, go ahead.
Recall, please, the name of just one innocent person who has perished, or a place where the righteous have been annihilated. As I have seen, those who would plow in sinfulness and sow evil are cut down. God's breath will blow them away, and his angry spirit will annihilate them. The roar of the lion will then cease, and the sharp teeth of the lion cubs will be torn out. The largest lions will perish for lack of prey, and the young cubs of the lioness will be scattered.
Okay, now ignore the lion muscle for a second here. Or even, ignore the lion muscle, okay? I decided to skip that in my summary. Especially in Psukim 7 and 8, this is where Eliphaz is giving his answer about why Iyov suffered, okay? So again, Iyov's theory about why he suffered is it was just chance or it was astrology, okay? It was all predetermined. What do you see from Psukim 7 and 8? What is Eliphaz's explanation for why Iyov is suffering?
Because he's sinful.
Because he sinned, okay, is if you were totally righteous, then you would not have been punished, okay, and therefore you must have sinned. And he proves it by saying, you tell me the name of just one righteous person who has suffered, okay, wait, what did he say? Hold on a second. Who has suffered, who has perished or a place where the righteous have been annihilated. He's saying God doesn't do evil, therefore if something bad happened to you, it must, let me go back. It must have been your sin. Okay. Now, have you heard this explanation before about why people suffer? Yes. Okay. This is probably the most common explanation for why people suffer, is that if someone is suffering, then it must be that they sinned. Okay. Now, here's a trick question. Okay. Is this a good answer or not?
I don't think it's a good answer in the sense that, like, then it wouldn't be fair that all of his kids would have died.
Okay.
Because they aren't him.
Okay, good.
But also in the second half, like when he's talking about the lion, it kind of sounds like he's answering that also.
Yeah, the lion thing we might have to go back and look at because I really don't remember about the lion and I didn't incorporate it here. The roar of the lion will then cease. And obviously, this is a mashal here, right? God's breath will blow them away and his angry spirit will annihilate them. The roar of the lion will then cease and the sharp teeth of the lion cubs will be torn out. The large lions, sounds like the lions are a mashal for like the Rishayim, right? That God is going to, those who sow evil are going to be cut down. And then he goes on to just describe these lions being destroyed. So it sounds like that's a mashal for the wicked. So just to repeat what Leah said. So on the one hand, this is not a good answer for Iyov's situation because it doesn't explain why his kids got killed. Also might not explain like why the punishment was so bad. But here's the thing is, do we maintain that God rewards people for doing mitzvahs and punishes them for sins? Yes. Okay. We do believe that there is such thing as reward and punishment and that people do suffer for their sins. Okay. So one of the things that I want you to keep in mind, and I'm going to remind you of this at every step of the way, because it's very easy for students to forget, who are learning Iyov for the first time. All of the false answers given by Iyov's friends are not entirely false. Okay. Every one of his friends is going to say something that is true. But the question is that answer enough to explain Iyov's situation? So in this case, Eliphaz is saying a true idea, which is that people suffer as a result of their sins, okay, as a divine punishment. But the question is that going to be able to explain why Iyov suffered? And that's when Iyov is going to disprove them. Okay, so don't walk away thinking that there's no reward and punishment. There is reward and punishment, but the question is that enough to explain Iyov's situation? Okay, next, Emily, could you continue reading?
Yeah, sure. The matter came to me stealthily, which my ears only partially grasped. Ruminations aroused by nocturnal visions that occur when people first deceased into deep sleep.
Not deceased.
Descend. Yeah, I saw that after.
Okay.
Fear and trembling seized me, and my bones quaked.
Quaked, yeah.
A breeze brushed my face, and the hair on my flesh bristled. Something stood there that I could not recognize, like an image before my eyes, and I heard a faint whisper.
Yeah. Okay. So hold on a second. So according to the Malbim, each of Iyov's friends gets his own answer from a different source. Okay. So this, according to the Malbim, is where Eliphaz is saying where he got his answer. Now, what does it sound like? Where does it sound like he got his answer from? He hasn't said his answer yet, his full answer. But what does it sound like he's describing here?
Like some random
Yeah.
voice which you heard.
Some voice which you heard, which sounds like Nevuah, right? So according to the Malbim, Eliphaz is saying, I know that I'm right because the answer came to me in a revelation. Okay, whether he's claiming to be a Navi, whether he's claiming to get Ruach HaKodesh, whether he's claiming to get a prophetic dream, not clear, but he's claiming that he knows that he's right because he got this in a revelation. A voice told him this, which I saw Leah flashed a skeptical face. I think if I was reading your expression correctly. Or is she frozen now?
Yeah, you're frozen for me too.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I think we would all agree this is a little sketchy, right? If you're having a philosophical debate with your friend and he says, how do I know that I'm right? Because a voice told me last night. Then you start to back away. Okay. So but that's what Eliphaz is claiming. Okay. So then he goes on. Someone else want to read now? Yeah, go ahead, Leah.
Okay. Can a mere mortal be more righteous than God? Can a man be purer than his maker? Look, he does not even have faith in his own servants and finds faults with his angels. How then can we trust those whose spirits dwell in earthen houses and foundations made of dust, and who will be turned by maggots into dust?
Okay. All right. Again, very poetic here. So what do you think he's saying? First of all, what does he mean? Can a mere mortal be more righteous than God? I mean, obviously that seems to imply that he thinks that Iyov is claiming to be more righteous than God. But what does that mean? Because God, it's not like God does sins, so what does it mean more righteous in this context?
Maybe like you were so quick to disqualify the premise about God as opposed to about you.
Okay, good. So we mentioned, I'm just going to put this in terms of the chart that we had. Why did Iyov reject the possibility that God knows what's going on and everything is really in line with justice?
Because then it wouldn't fit in with him being perfect and right.
Right. Then it wouldn't fit in with him being perfect. So what Eliphaz is saying to Iyov is saying, you think that God is, in other words, you were inclined to think that God was doing injustice, and you basically are trusting your own self-assessment of righteousness more than God. So like, you think you're a better judge than God. You think you're more righteous than God's standards, and then he gives an argument to back this up. What do you think he means when he says that God doesn't even have faith in his own servants and finds fault with his angels? How could he trust those whose spirits dwell in earthen houses on foundations made of dust, and those will be turned by maggots into dust? Who's that, by the way? Who's he talking about in chapter 19 or in Pasuk 19?
Man,
Right? So he's saying, he's making a kal v'chomer argument. He's saying, if God doesn't even trust in his own angels and he finds fault with them, kal v'chomer, man who is in earthen houses, mean we're physical beings and we're going to rot and decompose. So what is the overall point here?
That it must be you're actually not perfect.
Yeah, he's saying it must be that you're not perfect. Okay, he's saying not even the angels, okay, can claim to be totally righteous, and therefore our avodas Hashem will always fall short of Hashem's expectations. So how can you just walk around saying like, I'm totally innocent, I'm totally righteous? you're out of line there, right? If even the angels can't be totally righteous, and if humans can't be totally righteous, then how can you claim to be totally righteous? Okay. I'll give you a second, and then we'll go on. Okay. Next, Leah, you were reading, right? Go ahead.
They will be punished only from morning to evening in order to spare them from perishing eternally. Their excess will be taken from them in order to spare them from dying unwisely.
Yeah. Now, I skipped a few psukim here because he goes on, and I didn't see any more major points here. I thought it was just poetry. So we'll focus on 20 and 21. So what is he saying here? This is a new point.
That
Like,
also,
Yeah, go ahead, Leah.
like even if someone's punished, like they're not going to be punished so harshly to the point where they're like completely destroyed.
Okay,
Which
good.
is why he said, "If you're still alive."
Okay, good. So that's number one, is it's not going to be total permanent destruction, right? We don't hold by yesterday we were talking about actually, side point for 1 second. Yesterday in Pirkei Avos when we talked about Gehenna, or maybe it was 2 days ago, then I think when you were reading it, you translated it, and you initially translated Gehenna as hell, and then you switched it, right? Or did I hear that? Or I thought you heard. So regardless of whether you said that or not, what's the difference between the Christian version of hell and like the idea of Gehenna? Like the main difference? I don't know how much you know about Christian idea of hell, but I think you could get this just from movies and stuff.
Maybe it's like more literal, like it's physical.
That definitely seems to be one of the differences. Yeah, that's true. But in terms of this here, this is a hint. So the standard Christian idea of hell, and I'm sure there's differences in different sects of Christianity, but the main idea is that it is eternal punishment. It's forever, and it is for the sake of punishment. Okay. Whereas Gehenna, we do not hold that it is forever. First of all, not everyone holds that Gehenna exists, right? That's a machlokas between the Rambam and the Ramban, among others. But if Gehenna does exist, it's not permanent. It's for it's temporary. Okay. And what's the purpose of it? Or what's the purpose of all punishment? Say again, Eliana?
Teach a lesson?
Yeah. Purpose of punishment in Judaism is always rehabilitative. It's always to improve you or for your own good. Okay. So that's the point that he's making to Iyov here. Oh, sorry. I forgot that there's one more. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this clarifies a little bit. Yeah, go on, Leah.
Behold, fortunate is the man whom God reproves. Do not despise the chastisement of the Almighty, for he binds the wounds that he inflicts. He bruises, but his hands also heal. 6 misfortunes will not save you, so that the harm of a 7th will not affect you.
Yeah, sorry.
Through
6
famine-
misfortunes will save you. I thought you said will not. 6
Oh, yeah.
will save you,
Will
so that the harm of 7th will not affect you.
not affect you. Okay. Through famine he will save you from death, and through war he will save you from the sword.
Okay, good. So what is Eliphaz trying to what point is he trying to get Iyov to realize about this punishment that he received?
It's not like permanent?
It's not
So
permanent,
that, like, he can like come back up from it?
and he can come back up from it. And what was its purpose? Or
Teach
what
him a
attitude
lesson.
should he have? Say again?
Teach him a lesson.
Teach him a lesson. Okay, good. So God is punishing you for your own benefit to spare you from future punishment and suffering. Okay, that not only, so he's basically like, he's giving him the full package deal. You're saying, okay, why did you suffer? Because you sinned. And why is God doing this? To help you improve and for your benefit. And therefore you should be happy that God did this to you, because this is all for your good. And if you didn't get this, you'd be suffering forever. And just to remind you, if you, in the course of your life, when you go to a shiva house, never say this. Okay. This is bad. Okay. This is an example of what not to do. All right. Is you don't tell the person it's because they sinned. All right. So this is Eliphaz is not doing a good thing here. Okay. I believe this is now the last point. Anyone who didn't read yet want to read? Go ahead, Ayala, Terabello.
Because of the lash of another's eloquence, you will be confined and therefore need not fear the oncoming destruction. You will make light of the oncoming destruction and famine, and will not fear the wild beasts of the land. It will be as though you made a treaty with the stones of the field, and wild beasts have made peace with you. You will know that your household is perfect, and when you examine your possessions, there will be nothing lacking. You will know that your children and grandchildren have flourished like the grass of the land. You will go to your grave in the ripeness of age, like a sheaf of wheat, harvested at just the right time. Behold, we have reason that this is so. Mark it and acknowledge it for yourself.
Okay, so this is actually really what Eliana just said, is that you're going to bounce back. If you follow all these instructions, right? If you do tshuva, God is going to save you and he's going to restore you, and everything will be great. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean that God is going to resurrect your kids. Okay, but like that ship has sailed. But it means that you'll be put back into a good state. Okay.
It kind of sounds like it's a gift. Like this is a gift for you and your kids.
Yes, he is. I mean, although he is blaming Iyov, he is saying that this is your fault. He is saying that God is doing this in a way that is good, and that you should be thankful and appreciative and take advantage of this opportunity that he's given you. And you shouldn't despise God's chastisement. You should love it. Yeah. Okay. Hold on. So if you had to summarize the entire Eliphaz's point, like boil this down to one message that he's giving to Iyov, what would you say he's telling him? Or maybe like two messages.
Maybe like you're being punished because you did something wrong, you sinned, and that you can still like bounce back, and Hashem can like restore you.
Okay, good. That's a good summary, right? So he's punishing you for your sins. It's for your benefit, and you can bounce back, right? Is if you do tshuva, you can bounce back, and then just to tie that in with his other point is you are the one that's going to be the role model, right? Is that if you suffer this horrible punishment and then that makes you do tshuva and then God restores you, then everyone will be inspired and it'll be good for everybody. Yeah. Okay. So that is Eliphaz's message. And oh boy, does Iyov have a response to that. I'm trying to think now. We have 15-ish minutes. For some reason, I thought this was going to take us a little bit longer. So I'll give you two options. Okay, I can be persuaded to we could either go on to Iyov's response to Eliphaz now, or if you have a question and answer or random topic you want to do for the next 15 minutes, we could do that.
If no one else has a question, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
So the Gehenna thing that you were saying,
yeah,
you said like it's a punishment so that way you could learn from it, but once you're dead, you can't really change anymore. So how can you learn?
I was acknowledging what Eliana was saying, that you could learn from it, because in Iyov's case it was talking about punishment in Olam Hazeh. But when I summarized her, I modified it to say that it's corrective. Okay, so this is the big mystery about Gehenna. Okay, is that there is a principle in metaphysics, in Judaism at least, that the soul can only change when it is in a body. So, for example, when you're in this world, then you can do mitzvos and you can learn and perfect yourself. But once you're dead, then there's no way to change your soul. Your soul is frozen. Okay, not frozen like in ice, but like it's whenever you die, you are at that level permanently. Okay, so that's what the Rambam holds, and that's why the Rambam holds that you can't that's one of the reasons why the Rambam holds that there can't be a Gehenna, because how could there be any punishment after death that changes the soul? Okay, but the Ramban holds that there is a type of purification that the soul can undergo to prepare it for Olam Haba. And it's not through learning, because like Ayala said, you're dead, you're not learning anything. But it's some sort of purification that goes on, and that readies your soul for Olam Haba. And the Ran in the Drushos Ran says if we tried to figure out what this meant, hainu kecholmim, then we'd be like dreamers, meaning like there's no way that we can understand how this process works. And so he doesn't offer an explanation. There are people who do offer an explanation about like how can the soul be purified after death. But I suspect when I've researched this, I've found out that it seems like they have a different notion of what the soul is. According to the Rambam, the soul is a completely non-physical thing, and therefore it can't change after death. But it seems others hold that the soul is some sort of like different kind of substance. Like there's a spiritual substance that the soul is made out of. And then you could talk about purities and impurities, but I don't know how that works. But that's what they hold that Gehenna is somehow the spiritual fires of Gehenna can purify the substance of the soul from its impurities, kind of like the way that a crucible through heat purges the impurities from the silver. How that works, I don't know. And that's why personally, like I think of things in terms of the Rambam's view, because I don't know what that means in terms of Gehenna and of like a purification process after death. So the short answer is I don't know, but the ones who say that they do hold that there is some sort of spiritual substance that the soul is made out of, and that it. And by the way, this is also tied to the fact that I believe it's related to the fact that you know how when you have I guess this is a couple parts. We're not in Parshat Noach, but the visitors who came to Abraham, the three men, right? So the Rambam holds that all of that happened in a nevuah, but the Ramban holds that it's angels, and the angels could take on physical form, So I think that this is like related to that machlokas of can you have something that is spiritual have physical properties? Rambam's idea of spirituality is completely non-physical, but there are other notions of spirituality where they can take on some sort of physicality or have physical properties. And I think that's somehow connected to his idea of Gehenna, of the spiritual fire and stuff. So I just don't understand that view. I tried to work it on Rosh Hashanah, and my Chavrus and I couldn't figure anything out. Like he talks about how like the Ramban has a book on this, and he says that the people who are not complete Rishayim, so they go to Gehenna, and then the fire purifies them, and then they go to Olam Haba. But then the really bad Rishayim, they're burnt up, and they become ashes that are scattered under the feet of the tzaddikim. We didn't exactly know what that meant because it's not physical. So like, what does that mean, ashes? And it didn't sound like he's talking like a mushal. So ask if you find someone who's a Ramban expert, ask them, because I'm not a Ramban expert.
If you say that like it's completely not physical, like your soul goes to Olam Haba, then isn't it kind of like you're kind of like becoming or taking on a lot of God's trait, like his oneness?
So it's a good question, because I'll tell you the way that they put it when they talk about this question of what differentiates you, Leah Cohen, from Elisheva Conway is all your physical qualities or things tied to your physical qualities, right? Like you have different height, different color hair, or whatever. You also have different knowledge, but you have different knowledge because you're in two different bodies and you've been exposed to different things, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So the problem is once you die and your soul is no longer in a physical body and your soul is non-physical, what differentiates souls from each other in Olam Haba? So there are theories, okay, that in Olam Haba, it's all just one big soul, okay, that there's nothing to differentiate different souls. The problem with that is then how can you have a different chelik in Olam Haba than someone else? Like we hold that each person gets their own chelik in Olam Haba. So it seems like the mainstream view in Judaism is that there is a way to differentiate, and each of you gets your independent reward. But they're all grappling with this question of how can you have differences in Olam Haba if there's no physical qualities, So when it comes to angels, the way we differentiate between different angels, whatever angels are, we'll talk about that later, is they're on different levels. Okay, that some of them have more knowledge than others, or are the cause of the existence of others in some way, But what that means and how it works, I don't really know. My answer to your question is yes, in a sense. Once you lose your physical qualities, the question becomes how can we differentiate between non-physical things? And we say, for example, that God is different than everything. So then what's the difference between your non-physical soul's difference, being different from everything, and God's difference from everything? Yeah, I don't know the answer, but that's what the messy problem looks like. Any other questions? I'm fine doing question and answer for the next 10 minutes, or we can move on. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop sharing and start setting up the next PowerPoint. But if we want to do questions, then just ask them. Okay, I'm gonna take that as a no. All right, so let's start off on the new. Here we go.
Okay, I actually just thought of a question.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
So what is the Torah's view on like relationships?
Can you
Like
be more
every kind of
specific?
relationship, I mean. I guess so.
Like,
Like,
what?
you know, psychology changes throughout the time. Like now it's a value to be really open and like vulnerable in a relationship, like in order to get closer or whatever. So like, do we see things like that, like advice on like, I don't know. Yeah, things like that in the Torah?
Yeah, so the answer to that
Like every
question
different
really
types of
is like it requires learning about each different aspect of relationships. You know, so let's say for example, the Torah, you know, there are views on kindness and you know, responsibility in relationships, romance, attraction, you know, all this other stuff. So you'd really have to look into each question on its own. So it's hard for me to give like a one answer to everything. Yeah, I'll tell you,
The
there
way
is
to do that, you think would be
So one thing that I was thinking about doing is one of you did this in your Pirkei Avos choice of Kanela Chachaver, of acquire a friend for yourself, and I think I mentioned this briefly in our end of the 11th grade preparing for living in a non-Jewish world thing, the levels of friendship. So maybe we could do that. And that mission in Pirkei Avos talks about friendship, and by friendship, it doesn't just mean like friends, it means relationships, you know. So maybe we could start there and then branch out to other topics from that.
Well, I have a question based off of Ayal's question.
Sure.
So how does like the Torah, like if a Torah contradicts like science, that's one thing, but if the Torah contradicts like psychology, like human psychology, like it tells you to do a mitzvah that would like, according to psychology, harm your child or like harm you,
Right.
then like what do you do in that situation?
Good question. Okay, so let me divide that into two questions. Okay, one is what do you do when you find a contradiction between Torah and psychology in terms of, let's say, like what Chazal say about psychology and what modern psychologists say about psychology? Like, what do you do there? And then the second question would be, what if it involves a mitzvah that would seem to be doing something that is against our understanding of psychology? Okay, so then those I'm dividing into a theoretical question and a practical question. Theoretical question is like just when you're learning and understanding Mefarshim. Practical question is in terms of action. Okay, so what do we say you do when you find let's say a contradiction between Torah and like the hard sciences, like physics and like biology and stuff like that?
You mean like
Well, if-
the word of Torah or like
Let's say like you know, the Torah says that the world was created in 6 days, but science says that the universe is billions of years old.
You have to try to like change the Torah so it fits in with science a little
Right.
bit.
Is you I know what you mean by that. Not change the Torah.
Like manipulate, like think, you know what I mean? Like
You mean like interpret the Torah in a way that fits with science, right? Exactly. Because the thing is you can't deny your senses. Okay, you can't deny your senses. Like we have evidence that the universe is 18 billion years old or whatever, 15 billion. I don't know what the current date is, current age. But and we know that the Torah is true. So the Torah and science must be in line with each other. Okay. So either we're misunderstanding science or we're misunderstanding the Torah. Okay. And in a case where the science is very clear, so then we might have to reinterpret the Torah or just acknowledge that we don't know. Okay. So that's for the hard sciences. Okay. Are you familiar with the distinction between hard sciences and soft sciences? Have you heard that distinction before? Okay, I don't know the exact definition, but hard sciences are things that are based on like experimentation and like you can get I'm actually let me just look at the definition for on Wikipedia. Hold on. Get a precise definition here. Hard sciences. So it says here, I don't know what website this is, dictionary.com. It says hard sciences are any of the natural or physical sciences, such as chemistry, biology, physics, or astronomy, in which aspects of the universe are investigated by means of hypotheses and experiments. Okay, and then soft science is any of the specialized fields or disciplines such as psychology, sociology, anthropology, or political science that interpret human behavior, institutions, society, etc., on the basis of scientific investigations for which it may be difficult to establish strictly measurable criteria. So I know this is like not necessarily the clearest definition, but right now, psychology is not on the level of a hard science. So when it comes to the hard sciences, when you can actually like definitively say that, for example, Chazal, the Rishonim say that there are 4 elements. We know based on like scientific evidence that there are more than 4 elements. When the Rambam and the Ramban thought that the planets had intelligence, we know that the planets don't have intelligence. Okay, so that's based on hard science. Soft sciences are very different, and there I would say you should be more skeptical and realize that like you may be misinterpreting Torah, and maybe the soft science is correct, but you also might be misinterpreting science, the soft science. Okay, like for example, do you know when did psychology first start? Like the formal study of psychology in history?
With like Freud?
Yeah, it was a little bit earlier than Freud, but yeah, around like the 1800s. Okay, like people studied human behavior before, but like treating it as a science only started very recently. So psychology is a very new science. Same thing with sociology and anthropology. So we're not at the point yet where you can just look at a psychological study and say, oh, well, that goes against Torah, so like we have to reinterpret Torah. It's a very speculative science, and you need to really be careful and realize that like the Torah is about psychology. The Torah is not about science. Like it's not, the point of Torah is it's not a science book, but the things in Torah are teaching you about psychology, so it's much harder to know when you need to reinterpret Torah and when you need to and when you need to assume that psychology is wrong. Okay, so that's my first part of my answer to you, if that makes sense. I think you're frozen again, so I can't tell if you're nodding or not. Yeah, okay.
I'm nodding.
Yeah. Okay. The second part is
what about like neuropsychology?
So neuropsychology is the
That's
closest to becoming a hard science, but neuropsychology is also very young in its field, and we really, if you ask any neuropsychologist, how much do we know about the brain? They'll say extremely little. Like we're really, really, really just at the very, very beginnings of like understanding that. We know a lot more about an amoeba, than like the human brain, So we're there, and neuropsychology is going to be the first, like, or neurology is going to be like the gateway to psychology being a hard science, but we're nowhere near that yet. Okay, regarding the other part of the question, which we don't have a lot of time for, is what happens if the Torah tells you to do something which, according to psychology, is harmful? So what I would say is, same for all mitzvos, is that we have to do mitzvos whether we understand them or not. We have to follow halacha regardless of whether we understand it. The only exception would be that if something in psychology told us that this is actually sakanas nefashos, that this is actually like a danger to life, so then we take that into account because we're very machmir on danger to life. So let's say, for example, I can't think of an example right now, but let me expand that also, is that psychology could shed light on other aspects of halacha as well by providing facts. Let's say, for example, in halacha, you have a concept of a shoteh, which is someone who is mentally handicapped. So we need knowledge of medicine in order to be able to diagnose someone halachically as mentally handicapped. And as science advances, then our understanding of halacha might change. Let's actually return to this question because we're done now, but like I don't want to, there's more to say. Okay, so next time at some point, remind me of this, Leah, and we'll come back to it. All right, have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. Today.